Tingles with flyby. Hello, my tinglings, and welcome to my video about why I left the Mormon church. This has been a much requested video, and so I thought that it took me a long time to sort my thoughts together, but we will be talking about today why I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or what I'll call Mormonism. Lots of people within the church do refer to it as Mormon and that sort of thing. Anyway, it's kind of a cultural thing, even though the church has kind of tried to rebrand itself and focus more on the Christian aspect. But anyway, I digress. Before I get right into this video, I want to let you know part of the reason it's taken me so long to get around to this video is not because I don't know what to say. More so, I have so much to say that it's hard to figure out what to say in one chunk. I was writing down some notes before this video so I could kind of figure out what I was going to focus on. And if I did this all in one single video, I don't know how long it would be, really. So today I'm just going to talk about my personal experience with the church and the actual story of when I left and the particulars of that event. And then, if we have time, I'll get into some of my reflections post leaving the church. And I have a desire to speak about comparing Mormonism and the signs of a destructive cult. It doesn't meet all of them, but it does meet some of them. So I don't think I'll have time to go through that today, though, because I have a lot to say. So I think we should probably just get into it. An important part of understanding my experience with Mormonism, it is inseparably tied to my first marriage, which was very emotionally abusive. It was a very dark time in my life. And so a lot of my reflections on getting out of that relationship have been what got me into that relationship in the first place, and why did I find myself in that position. So, as many of you know, my parents were divorced when I was quite young. I was about 5 years old. And so I never really had an example of a healthy relationship that I kind of saw very frequently. Both of my sets of grandparents, while still together and in relatively good marriages, lived on the other side of the country. And so I would see them once a year, but it never really internalized into my mind what their relationships were, and that I could use them as an example. I guess it's all under the surface. And so I had a lot of uncertainty growing up, feeling like, well, do you get into a relationship? How do you, know you're in love and all this other sort of thing. And at the same time, I kind of had this experience of, oh, my parents are divorced and this is hard for me and I would never want my kids to have to go through this. And so it was kind of a non-negotiable for me. I was never going to get divorced. Well, I don't recommend having that attitude. Let me start off with. But that attitude was not really dissuaded by a lot of the messaging that I got, which a lot of the messaging around family and relationships that I got was at church. Families are forever, and it's important to marry a worthy male in the temple, that there's no greater happiness than something in the home. I can't remember them all. I've been out of the church for a while now, actually. But lots of messaging around marriage, and particularly it's for men and women. It's not, I wouldn't say it's more that women really need to get married. Men who aren't married beyond a certain age or have things said about them as well, which I really don't remember that well. It makes me happy, actually. But anyway, so I had a lot of uncertainty around getting into a relationship, but I also felt like it was something important that I needed to be married. It's part of your eternal salvation. In the Mormon belief system is being married and being sealed. You can't have the fullness of the gospel without being sealed, which is to be married. And so, kind of this whole background of this is really important, and this is this, and basically, and then other quotes talking about how all you need is a worthy male and willingness, and it doesn't really matter who you marry. Basically, there's quotes talking about how compatibility isn't a real thing. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but saying that all that matters is basically that you're both righteous people and the two of you will then have a good marriage. So, interesting concepts. So, these are the sort of concepts that I had. And then I met Janardin, my ex, and we got together a couple of years after I started knowing him. But there was at some point that I kind of just had this realization that he would marry me, and I kind of had this feeling that if I married him, that he would never leave me. And because I had this no divorce platitude or necessity, I needed to have that be the case. Couldn't have somebody who was going to divorce me. And so I embraced that certainty and married Janardin, and 4 years later, he left me. And that kind of came tumbling down. I was like, oh, well, I felt really certain about that, and kind of unpacked and analyzed my feelings in that, trying to figure out what was I really doing there, why did I feel so certain, and then what I thought was certain was not certain at all. What was going on here? And I realized that a lot of that was insecurity in myself. I wanted to feel secure. Started analyzing the things that I've mentioned earlier about how I felt so uncertain and unstable about what love is and how to get a relationship, that I just kind of left. He was the first person I ever dated. We got married, had an unhappy and not good marriage. And so that was me starting to realize that I had been clinging to certainty, that I wanted something that made me feel certain, that would make me feel stable, because inside I was afraid. And that was a powerful feeling, and from there I changed a lot because I didn't want to make the same mistake again. I didn't want to end up just in a loop doing the same thing over and over again. And I most of all did not want to be in a relationship because I was so happy when I was single after he left me, and I did not want to lose that. And so I decided that it had to be pretty damn good to entice me to give up my singlehood. Well, my love came along, and he was damn good. And he enticed me to give up my singlehood. And obviously I had a lot of questions in myself to make sure that I was making choices about this relationship for the right reason, to make sure that I wasn't clinging to certainty. And I mean, I really couldn't be clinging to certainty, because hopping on a plane about halfway across the world and not knowing, I mean, having the thought in your head that he could potentially not even show up, probably the least certain thing you can do. I felt very sure that he was genuine. I felt very sure, but always tempered by that I had a backup plan. If he didn't show up, I was going to hop on a plane to Sydney and be spending the year with Mark, my son. But he was there, and I was Mormon. I showed up wearing garments. I asked him to pray with me, meaning not having him pray, but to be with me, and I prayed out loud with him there. And we didn't sleep together. We did spend one night together but we weren't having sex, basically, because that was still important to me. But I wanted to be close to him. I loved him, and I was going to marry him very shortly. And so I wanted to be close to him. And so we did spend the night together, but both of us were clothed, and there was nothing scandalous going on. But the real point that really made me think about Mormonism was when I met his family. So I met his family, and his mom was freaking out. If you've heard me talk at all about his family, you'll know that his dad is awful and abusive, and And so his dad had basically kind of skewed the fact that I was a Mormon and made it seem like my love was going off to join a cult and that we were just, leaving them and everything like that. And so then my love was trying to calm his mom down and just telling her what his perspective on my Mormonism was. And I don't actually even remember what he said at all, really. It wasn't like there was like, oh, that's the phrase that just changed my mind. It's more so just hearing him kind of break down things logically and, oh, she thinks this and I think this and we still love each other and I don't know. Whatever he was saying. And he was saying how he doesn't agree with Mormonism and he sees religion as a force. I really don't remember what he said. Anyway, and it didn't really give me a lot of pause at the time. But I remember the next day we were driving to Melbourne, which was then we were flying off to New Zealand, which is where we got married. And I remember it was in the morning. I woke up, I had my garments on, and the gears in my mind were just working. And the real question, and it wasn't something he said, this was the question, something about the thoughts that he was expressing brought this question to my mind. And this is the key question. This is the exact question, the reason I am no longer Mormon. And the question was, am I doing the same thing with the church that I was doing with Janardin? Am I trying to cling to something that makes me feel certain, that makes me feel stable, that gives me some sort of safety, but that I don't actually really know, that I don't actually, that I can't know. And as soon as that question came across my mind, I knew what the answer was. But I was very quiet on our drive over. It's about an 8 to 10 hour drive. And, we're driving off to elope and get married. It's supposed to be a really happy and, joyous occasion. And here I am, just super quiet, super pensive, just considering my whole lifetime and everything I've ever thought. And am I actually going to be putting that in the past, It's kind of like I knew at that moment that that is what I was doing. I knew at that moment that it was an insecurity, and that was why I had been in the church, that was why I had clung to it. It gives me this sense of certainty. It makes me feel good to feel like I know something about what's going to happen after I die, about what is good for me now. Oh, follow the spirit, just all these things, or a structure that's telling you what to do, lots of different things, just providing a bit of stability. And then I realized, but it's all smoke and mirrors. There's nothing for it to actually be based on. And And so that was the day. I woke up Mormon, said my prayers in the morning, and then it was dark because we left in the morning, but I remember my first act was that my first act? Yeah, my first act was getting an iced tea, and it was dark by that time, but it was kind of, or did I? Because I was like, no, I don't want that to be my first act. I don't remember, because he said I could get an iced tea, and I was like, no, I don't want any, because while I had pretty much decided that I didn't want to be Mormon anymore, I didn't want that to be my first act. I wanted to have wine first or something like that. Anyway, we had sex that night. That was a good first act. Very good. Especially since I didn't have sex in my first marriage. I know somebody did ask me to actually make a video about that, but I'm not sure if I will, because it's a bit hard to go into, I guess, on a relaxation channel. But anyway, so that is basically the story of how I left the church. I have not been back to church since. I was just trying to think, because I may end up going when my nieces are here if they want someone to go with them, although I may leave that duty to my dad, but yeah. Just had to check the time. Shall we? Okay. So, up to that point, it's been relatively safe for anybody who is Mormon and doesn't want, I don't know. Anyway, basically from here on, this is all completely unfiltered, completely what I think. So, and let's just be direct. I'm not going to shy away from mentioning things said in the temple, so if you don't want to see that, then I would stop watching now. So, obviously I've had a lot of changes and thoughts since I left the church, and I had an identity crisis short after that as well. Usually if you move countries, you'll have an identity crisis. Usually if you leave your religion, you'll have an identity crisis. I did both at once, so pretty much was guaranteed that I was going to have one. But anyway, so I did lots of digging, lots of reading, lots of thinking about the church, and not just, I guess I'm very unhappy with certain things that I've done in my life, and I take responsibility for them. I will get into my biggest regret in my life at the end, well, in a little bit. And so, done a lot of thinking, kind of what has led me to different choices. First, marrying Janardhan. Why did I marry him? And then choices within that marriage. Why did I put my self second? Why did I defer so much to him? Why was I like that? Because even this many years on, it took a really strong conversation with my dad for my dad to understand that I could even have been abused in my first relationship, because he just sees me as such a strong, stubborn person that he didn't think I could be abused. And especially by somebody like Janardin, who's not very powerful. And the thing I said to him was, well, yeah, but if I give him my power, that doesn't leave me with any. So one of the things in the temple that is said for men, you're kind of blessed, or I don't know, make a commitment to trying to become a king and a priest to the Most High God. So obviously it's about your relationship to your God. And for women, it's to be a queen and a priestess unto your husband. So that is a problem to me. And it was a problem for me in my last relationship. This gets into my relationship with Mark, my son, as well. I met Mark while I was married to Janardin, and he was suicidal at the time, about 14 years old. I won't go into tons of details because I do want to make a full video on that. But he was going through a rough time, and I basically came in and had motherly feelings towards him. And so we developed a mother-son relationship. But Janardin didn't like it. He also didn't like my relationship with my sister. He didn't want me to have her as my confidant if we were going to live close to her. And because he was my priesthood leader, there's a structure there for women to listen to men on what they should do. That he presides over me. That means he has a better idea of what I should do for myself than what I should do for myself. And so when he said that he didn't want my sister to be my confidant, I listened. I maintained a relationship with her, but I did back off a bit. And, well, he then weaseled his way in, and anyway, there's drama there as well, which I won't go into right now. As I said, so many topics relate to this. But, well, so that one, and then also my relationship with Mark. My single biggest regret in my life was when I stopped talking to Mark for about a month. And it was, I had gone in, well, Janardin recommended that I go in and talk to the bishop about this. He wasn't Mormon anymore. So, anyway, obvious ploy to try and get somebody else to back up his position. But anyway. So I go in and talk to the bishop, and he kind of gives me wishy-washy advice, but then says, yeah, I recommend that you get out of the relationship, or yeah, they don't do this anymore. And I was just like, but it also, oh, that's my priesthood leader telling me that, and this is the person who, is over me and is supposed to know what's best for me, so maybe I need to listen to that. And it was a big mental there was a lot of mental anguish kind of drawing me back and forth. And it was basically, as soon as I saw that Mark was in a safe enough place that he could handle me not being there, then I did cut off contact with him for a month. And that is the biggest regret of my life. And when I came back and was talking to him, He was very cold, very distant, but obviously eventually let me back in. But I don't know if it ever has been the same between us since then, and I can't really blame him for that either. I only blame myself, because I turned my back on him, and that's not what I should have done. So, I regret that, and that was my decision, but I do not appreciate the advice I received to do such. And then, if you want to say, oh, you know, it was inspired and that sort of thing, well, then you would think going to Australia to visit him a year later with a different, when I went to talk to a bishop before I went, and he was so supportive and just thought this was a great thing and that I was very loving and very caring. And if, you know, the first one was really inspired, if he was really speaking God's word, could God really have changed his mind that quickly about that thing? I don't think so. So, there's no way to actually think that any of it's real, in my opinion. So much cognitive dissonance it takes. The other thing that I really dislike is the structural imperfection. The whole concept behind everything is that we're striving for perfection. Well, I don't know anybody who's perfect. And yeah, you have a story that Jesus was perfect, but I don't know Jesus. I've never seen anybody who's perfect, so why would I think that I can be perfect, and why would I think that I should be perfect? And just that whole concept of, oh, I'm not perfect, so I have to be working on myself to improve myself, that really rubs me up the wrong way now, because I'm like, no, you don't get to tell me that I am not perfectly fine the way I am. When I have a problem with how I am, then I can improve myself on it. Some arbitrary other body or person doesn't get to tell me that. And so just the inherent perpetual message that you are imperfect and therefore not good enough really upsets me. It does make me quite angry, actually, because I think about just, you know, my young nieces and nephew being raised in this sort of environment, being perpetually fed these messages that they aren't good enough and that they need to strive for perfection instead of being, you know, back your own judgment. You're great the way you are. You're, you know, wonderful and you can figure it out. Other gripe is follow the spirit. It's completely different to say follow the spirit to trust your gut. Trust your gut is very inside of you. That's your own thing. It's very individualistic. Following the spirit is much more nebulous. It's also mediated by, oh, well, you can't have the spirit say something that would contradict what the prophet said or what whoever else said because they're your priesthood leader, and, oh, well, this is a commandment and this is a commandment, so the spirit can't lead you away from these things. So basically it's like, trust your gut, but just surrounded in asterisks. So I don't like that. I don't like the concept of following the spirit. I like the concept of trusting your gut, because it is our emotional thinking that actually makes us towards the top of the food chain. Because if you actually only think with logical thinking, there's a lot of times where you just can't, like logically, you can't actually make a difference between things. Like standing in front of a cereal aisle, there isn't always a logical best answer. And so sometimes you need emotional thinking. You need to trust your gut, go with what you feel. And that's part of how we're programmed, that's part of how we're designed, is with this very emotional thinking. And you need to trust that to a certain degree. You also need to be able to try and amass as many facts as you can, because that makes your emotional thinking even better. But trying to follow the spirit, to me, is kind of the complete opposite of all of that. It's try and assemble as few facts as possible, and instead just try and magic your way to a solution and an answer. Which, I know people disagree with that, but whatever. It's my video, isn't it? And, yeah, the final thing is that the whole concept is, if you leave the church or if you lose your faith, that it makes the concept of not being Mormon anymore is spoken about and looked upon as, like getting cancer. It's just such an awful thing to happen to somebody. And so it's not a kind of logical, it's not for everybody. Some people won't want to be in the church, some will. It's that it's, the worst possible reaction. So it's kind of like, once you see that somebody has that, then people are trying to reanalyze your actions leading up to that point to see, okay, well, what did they do wrong so that led them there? So, like my brother-in-law gave me a blessing before I went to Australia, kind of warning me about going there. And so maybe to him it might appear as if, I made the wrong decision, and that because then I ended up losing my faith and I left the church. Whereas for me, the person experiencing that, it's one of the best decisions of my life, and I am so bloody happy with it. I love my life now. I am so grateful for it, and I feel 100 times better than I did before. Even with everything that my love is going through, which some of you know a bit about, it's, even when I'm confronting that day in, day out, this is still the best time that I've had in my life. I'm really happy with my life. I've got my love, I've got my son, and I'm just really, really pleased. So if I was warned against doing this, well, that warning was wrong, because you were warning me against the greatest things that have happened in my life. Anyway, but, some people may not feel like that, and so that kind of bothers me, that perception of like, these are the things. It's that revisionary thinking that things before were indicating what was going to happen. And obviously there are steps on a path that lead you a particular area, but that doesn't mean that it was the wrong direction for me. Just because it's what you're afraid of doing, because it's what you don't want to happen to you, doesn't mean that it was the bad thing for me, or that my actions before that event are bad either. so that does annoy me. But anyway, I could go on, but I think that is enough for right now. I will do another video at some point with the 15 signs of a destructive cult and going through my perspective on how and whether Mormonism counts or qualifies for each of those, and whether I think it's overall a destructive cult. So be sure to subscribe so that you can see that if you are interested. Otherwise, if you have any questions, I am an open book. Let me know down in the comments. I'm sure you'll have tons of questions, so feel free to let me know and I will answer them. If it's too long for in a comment, then I can save the questions and do them all in a third video on Mormonism. So if you guys come up with really good questions, another video. Not that you're not going to get more videos from me anyway, but you know I always put one out every day. So thank you for your interest in this topic, and I would love to talk more about it, so please, if you have any questions at all, do put them in the comments. I would love to do a video just on your questions about this, so let me know. And I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye, my tinglings, and trust your gut. Thanks for watching.